So, gentlemen, if you can come on stage.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Set up the laptop.
Good, Mark. Good morning. It's not lost on us that we are standing between you and lunch, number one. So we'll work to get pretty quick. We're just going to let Mike set up a quick piece of technology. My name is Mike Winters. I lead the experience management team for the Academy at Bank of America. And our primary responsibility is to gather data on the teammate experience as they go through their academy experience to learn basically how to do their job. And we've been doing this for a couple of years, and we've learned a lot of things, and our teammates are telling us a lot of things that is probably going to revolutionize the way we prepare teammates for role going into the next 4 or 5 years. And we're going to share with you today a little bit about that story. And as soon as Mike gives me the thumbs up, we're going ahead and kick it off here with a little bit of a video. So that's the essence of where we're going. We'll make it quick so we can get you to lunch. I don't know if you can tell by how we're dressed. We're definitely bankers. This is casual for us. It works. We were talking yesterday, and we're like, so it's business casual. What's that mean? I go, for me, it's like no tie, right? He's like, yeah, no tie. And we're here today. We're like, oh, man, I could have wore jeans and sneakers. We're not quite there yet. Are we ready?
There we go. Oh, not really. No sound.
Thank you for calling Bank of America. This call may be monitored and or recorded. My name is Jessica with the Estate Servicing
No, we have
Operations.
sound.
What we
Let's
have-
skip that video. Let's just go right into it.
So let's get started.
Yeah.
So the road to virtual reality. Let's go to the next one. Let's talk a little bit about what our teammates are saying. So here's what we've learned. Prior to introducing virtual reality to our teammates, we measure 3 key metrics when we ask them to go through one of our programs. There's a lot of other questions we ask, but the big 3 that we kind of use as our guideposts are likelihood to recommend, the bank as a place to work, how their overall satisfaction with the program is, and role preparedness. And you can see we were struggling, and yet we have very robust programs. And I would say we were industry leading when you look at how we prepare teammates for role. But the one that comes up all the time and was coming up early in 2020 was hands-on training. But the opportunity we had was teammates would just say, we want more hands-on training. And they wouldn't really identify what hands-on training was. And so we started to dive into that and retool some of our questions to really learn. So what you see there, right, top 2 boxes, that means 65% of teammates who answer that question, 9 or 10, everybody else is, below. And then when you look at that, and we look at sentiment, right, we actually look at the words that they're using, 75% of the teammates who actually comment mention hands-on training and a negative sentiment, meaning we've got some work to do. And that's how we pave the way to move into VR. You can hit the next slide real quick. There's a little bit of verbatims there, Mike, if you want to just see. So these are some of the things that our teammates have been telling us in the verbatim. And what we're starting to see today, and we'll go into some, we'll recap some of these numbers, but what we're starting to see today is they're also starting to tell us how we can do the training better and how we can do it different. And part of that is the simulators that we're using, and in particular our lead into VR. So I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Awesome. Well, and you can see Mike Winters is a smart one. I'm the creative one. So when we started down this journey of immersive learning in particular, one of the things that we started to do was to research, like everybody else, right? Will this work? Can we make this work for our organization? And just like every single thing that is brand new, you start to hear of all the reasons why it's not going to, right? And so when we started looking at VR, people were like, it's going to be too expensive. You cannot scale this. Your associates are not going to like it. They're not going to learn, right? And the list goes on and on and on. And so started taking all that in and really started to take a step back and think about what everybody was saying. But again, because it's something new, people tend to focus on the why not. But what people tend not to focus on is what you're doing today that actually isn't working. And that's what's important to really think about, because think about traditional training and the way we try to teach people today. The one thing when you think about web-based training in particular is exactly what you are seeing on the screen right now. Let's see what happens when I hit the next button every single time. So I can get to the end, take the assessment, cross my fingers, get that 80%, and I am golden, right? That is what happened. I have done it. Heck, some people may be doing it right now on their mobile phones, going through a web-based training. Compliance time. We know that it happens. And so the question is, when people do that, are they learning? No, but they are checking the box that they trained, right? And so traditional training has just as many gaps as immersive learning does. And it's just a question of, are you really going to take a step back and look at what you're doing? This then starts to happen, right? It's like, all right, let's get some people on a conference call because that'll be better, right? No next button, can't hit next. But then they're nodding off and they're going to sleep, right? But we've got a fix for that too. Let's just get them on Zoom. We can see them now, right? Even though they're probably multitasking and going through emails and looking at their phone and doing whatever else. Again, every single modality from a training perspective has its pros and its cons. And so if we just take a look at VR and start just focusing on the disadvantages, then of course you're going to walk away from it and say it's not going to work for us. And so you can't focus on that. You've got to focus on how it's going to help you. And so that's why we decided to go all in from an immersive learning perspective. My job in particular is to figure out ways to get our people to learn differently, because we are overwhelming them with information. We are asking them to read more, we're asking them to watch more, but we're technically asking them to practice less when we approach it from a traditional standpoint. Because you can bring them in for classroom trainings when you can, which has that added expense to it. You can continue to pump out web-based trainings that they're just skimming through and passing, and then you're just doing it over and over and over again. And so when people tell me VR is too expensive, well, how much are you spending every single day when you're recreating the same training? And they're not actually learning. And then you're turning over people, and then you're rehiring them. There has to be some level of change so that you can get people more proficient faster. And so what we started to see from a VR perspective is people are more focused. And so again, we looked at the disadvantages, and now let's talk about the positives. When somebody's in a VR headset, they are not multitasking. They cannot hit the next button. They're not looking at their phone. You can't just fast forward to get to the end. You have to focus. And as a trainer and as a facilitator, that's what I want. I want your attention. Even if I can get 20% more of it, then that is a victory for me as a trainer. And so VR is helping us from that perspective. It's also more engaging. And this is where we really started to understand some of the analytics that Mike is speaking about here, because folks are talking about this as if it's like the best thing ever. It's like, oh my gosh, do you know what I did today? They're talking about it at the dinner table. And I don't know about you guys, but I never talk about web-based training at the dinner table, ever. All right, certainly not in a good context, right? But now parents are going home talking to their kids about, hey, this is how I trained. And it's a cool thing to talk about. So we're getting them to be more focused. We're getting them to remember and retain, and we're getting them excited about training again. And that is extremely difficult to do from a traditional sense. And so our focus has been not just saying, hey, let's just buy a bunch of headsets and see what happens, right? Because again, you could spend all the money you want, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee you the result. It really comes down to the use cases. And that's where we decided to spend a lot of our time, is figuring out how we were going to use this modality. And so by the end of this year, we will have a little bit over 20 virtual reality training modules created for our associates. Next year, we're going to be creating an additional 20, so that'll give us 40 within a 2-year period. We are trending right now, and this particular stat is not specific just to VR, it's all of our immersive learnings, because we've got different simulators that we deploy. Some that are conversation simulators powered by AI, some that are system simulators to help people understand how to navigate systems. But all in all, when we take all 3 of those together, we are on a pace to have them complete 700,000 practice sessions in a year. Okay, and so to us, that is critically important, because if we try to get people to practice 700,000 times traditionally, it would almost be impossible. We don't have the manpower to sustain that. We don't have the expenses to actually make that happen. But immersive learning helps us scale and accomplish this, because what we want to do is get people to practice more and read a little bit less. We still want you to read, but we can't have you just read and say you're ready to do your job. And that's what we've been doing traditionally, and that's what needs to change. Currently, we have over 4,000 headsets deployed across the organization. Most are sitting in our financial center spaces, because that's where we started our launch, and we are now in the middle of deploying to our contact center spaces. So all of our call centers by the end of this year will have virtual reality headsets available for associates to take training. We're going to start with some of our other line of businesses in 2023, and we will continue throughout the rest of that year until we hit just about every location so that there is a virtual reality headset wherever we have associates. In our contact center spaces, it's obviously not a one-for-one, so we just have a bunch of headsets depending on how large the group sizes are. But with every single deployment, we change it up, we learn a little bit, and we ultimately adjust. As I mentioned before, the VR use cases are what's critically important here. And when we started down this journey, like everybody else, especially when you're starting to learn about new technology, you bring in all these vendors so that they could just start telling you about all the cool stuff that they have, right? And they all start promising you all the stuff that they have and why their thing is better than everybody else's. And so we brought them all in, they let us put on headsets, and we started to go through their demos. I was unbelievably underwhelmed with the demos that I took because I saw it, but I didn't feel like I learned anything. Like you could just click on some things. It almost felt like I was just watching a video and I was clicking. And so again, when we started to take a look at that, we're like, I don't know, this doesn't look promising. But again, kind of had to take a step back and said, okay, well, that's the negative view of it, like I was talking about before. How do we then look at what the positives are here? And so here's what I thought in my head. If you created a very bad web-based training, then guess what happens? It's going to be a very bad web-based training. But if you create a very good web-based training, then it's going to be better. People are going to learn more. Same thing happens with VR. You have to have the right use cases. And so we focus on a lot of what you see on the screen here, so soft skills. We want people to change behaviors. Because again, we focus a lot on tasks, right? And tasks are a lot easier to learn than a behavior is. And so soft skills is something that is very much underused from a VR perspective. Operational excellence, that one is a little bit more task focused. Leadership skills, soft skills. Mental health, that's another one where we are going to start actually deploying something in 2023 to help people from a VR meditation perspective because we want to give them the ability to disconnect. Whether it's for 5 minutes, whether it's for 20 minutes, you're on 20,000 conference calls in a day, you had a couple of client experiences that didn't go so well, take a break, reset. We're going to provide that. Difficult conversations, whether that's a coaching conversation or a client conversation, decision making, empathy, and interview skills. All things that if you tried to teach traditionally are very difficult to get people to practice. Because if you try to get people to practice soft skills today, how do you do it? Role plays? Well, do our leaders have all the time in the world to just do role plays? No, they do not. Are all of our leaders great at doing role plays? No, they are not. And so we have to have something that eliminates variability and allows for people to practice in a safe space, and VR provides that. And so that's how we are leveraging this tool in particular. And so I won't spend any time really talking about the stats on this page because I just told you guys about how we are seeing the difference here in their focus. And because they're focusing more, because they're practicing more, then now they are getting trained faster. They are now a little bit more confident to do what we've asked them to do because we've put them in a simulation that allows for them to screw up a little bit. And that's okay. We want them to screw up in VR. Please do. We'd rather you do it there than in real life. And so we are seeing the change. And we're even starting to see people who are resistant to the technology try it out. And while there always are going to be some people that don't love it and won't want to do it for a variety of different reasons, that's okay. Because here's the deal, we're not getting rid of traditional training, we're just enhancing it with these tools. That's the whole point of it.
Thanks, Mike. And so when you think about what Mike was saying, right, we're implementing a lot of simulators, we're implementing VR, and we're doing it based on voice of the teammate. They are the consumer of the learning, and so we're listening to them very actively. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting last week about the meditation VR that they're creating. We're going to be surveying that during its demo phase to make sure that we get it right, to make sure that the teammates are consuming a product that they want. And here's what they're saying. If you take a look at these, this is year-to-date improvements that we've made with some of the work that we've done. Won't get into all the numbers, but they're right there for you. Pretty significant. I can tell you confidently, because I looked this morning, that in our preferred space, our financial center space that Mike talked about, we're over 90% role preparedness. And that's where a majority of, guess what's out there? That's where a majority of the VR headsets are. And why do teammates like it? It's portable. They can access it anytime they want. They can take it anytime they want. They can do it 50 times. They can do it one time. This is what they want. They're also telling us, though, now, and this is where we're going, is that they want a more integrated learning experience. They don't want us to train them the way we're training them today. They want a more hybrid approach, and so we're doing that. And I think that's why our financial center space is shining brightly, is because they're already starting to integrate this VR into their model and figuring out where they can buy some additional time so those teammates get the practice that they need to be successful in their role. Think about it. We're training 20, 30, 40, 50,000 teammates a year to interact with our clients. To interact with our clients and help our clients meet their financial needs. You can't leave that up to a web-based training. You have to teach people how to talk to other people, especially if you've got young people coming into the workforce who are going to be talking to people like me who are older in the workforce, have very different needs and more complex needs. Want to hit the next slide? So here's where we've been, here's where we're going. You can see in the hands-on training, we're seeing some big improvements there. The number or the percentage of negative sentiments is starting to trend down, while overall satisfaction is starting to trend up. That's exactly what we want to see. It doesn't mean that we've conquered the world, but it certainly is validating for us that we are on the right path. And I can't underestimate this enough, because when I first got onto this project around listening to teammates and what they had to say, we didn't really know what we were going to learn. We've learned more in the last 2 years by aggregating and looking at that data. It's helping us make informed strategic change across our academy footprint and how we prepare teammates for role. And VR has now become a part of that, a very big part of that, and it's impacting the way teammates think about their job and really their role preparedness, which to us is key. If we have a teammate going out there and they're only 73% role prepared, that's not good. It's not acceptable. 81.8, not acceptable, but we're on the right path, and that's key.
One thing I'll share specific to some of the modules that we've built is we focused on, again, things that we were struggling teaching people traditionally. And one of those things is how to react to a bank robbery. And we started to look at our current training today, and it was filled with bullet points of do this, don't do this. We had them watch some videos, and then we basically said, all right, you're all ready to get robbed now, right? It wasn't sufficient. Right? And to be honest with you, even with VR, you're not necessarily 100% prepared to stand and deal with that type of situation, because it is difficult. It does create anxiety. But we were able to actually get folks a little bit nervous, get them a little bit anxious. And we're starting to be able to measure, well, how quick is your decision making? What decisions are you making? And so now we can focus in on the associates that we think, hey, they need a little bit more time, a little bit more help here. Because here's the reality. If we don't prepare them enough for this, then we are essentially putting them at risk. And not just themselves, but the people around them. Because one bad decision in this type of situation, and all of a sudden people are at risk. And so again, very, very different. We're trying to create that sense of urgency, that sense of anxiety, and being able to do it in this type of environment, this modality, certainly helps with that. We also had situations where we were looking at using this from a contact center perspective. And when we initially decided to do that, there was a lot of pushback. Like, how in the world are you going to do a contact center environment? Like, what could you possibly learn? These folks are just on the phone. Well, here's what we did. We wanted to actually give them the opportunity to have these conversations with clients, but just go beyond that. Because here's what they don't get the ability to do today, and that's actually see the client that they're speaking to. And so we wanted to allow them to see their clients in these particular simulations, because we wanted to instill the fact that there was a real person on the other end of that line. Because when you're taking 50, 60, 70 calls in a day, and somebody's upset and pushing back and yelling, you think that you almost take it personal. And you have to understand that there are reasons why someone may be reacting that way. So we get to show them someone who may have just been laid off, has a bunch of bills on their desk, someone who just lost someone. All of those types of scenarios to help them be more empathetic from that perspective. Again, it's something that this modality allows us to do that traditional training just does not. Over the last couple of months, we actually did an onboarding event in New York City where we brought in a bunch of new recruits and we put them through a metaverse experience where we taught them the history of Bank of America. We allowed them to be in a space together, collaborative, from a communications perspective so that they can talk to each other and interact in the metaverse and have fun with it. Because the journey down VR with training was just to start. It's now where we're going to go next and how we're going to use all of these modalities to make our associates better and to ultimately make the human connection better. And again, thinking about onboarding and how we do it today, very expensive when we try to fly everybody into this one location. Well, what if we didn't have to fly them all? What if it didn't matter where they were, we could still bring them together and create a sense of presence? And that's what we're able to do right now as this technology continues to evolve. And so for us, we are still going down this journey. I am learning something every single day as we go through this. What works, what doesn't work. I'm listening to associate feedback, and we're going to start focusing on use cases that we know we need to continue to focus on to help our people practice. So diversity and inclusion, workplace conduct, giving them a day in the life. And when you think about day in the life, think about how you can use that from a recruiting perspective. Because oftentimes we'll bring somebody that's applying for a job in, we'll talk to them about it, and we'll tell them, this is what you're gonna do. Well, how about if we could go beyond that and show them what they're going to do? And actually test out some of their skills and see how they react and their decision making. And that's how you use these modalities to help you. So again, instead of focusing on what it can't do, it's all about focusing on what it can. Because we are going to make our associates better, and we're gonna use technology to help us do that. Because if we use it the right way, it's going to be great for us. And so, again, I wouldn't call us the experts in VR by any means, but what I will tell you is we are forming this roadmap, and we want to go down it, and we don't want to follow other people. I don't care necessarily what other companies are doing, and not to say that I'm not looking at it, because I am, but I'm not looking for that so I can learn how to do it myself. I want to focus on what we need, and then I'm going to use the technology to help us get there. And that's, to me, why VR is so powerful and so important, because it absolutely can help you get down that journey. So I know we talked very, very quickly here because we wanted to make sure you guys had some time to eat. But if we've got some time for questions, we were happy to take them.
Absolutely. And that was fascinating, guys. I think a round of applause for the gentleman.
Thanks. Thank you.
Fantastic. Hands up, I think some of the cameras? Microphones are around. Any questions?
They're hungry, I know that.
And there's a couple there, yep. If you wait long enough, someone puts their hand up.
Just curious, yeah, John Boron, Millipore Sigma, St. Louis, Missouri. Curious at what vendors you guys, I mean, you guys were showing some pretty fantastic stuff that's well developed. What vendors have you used, or is this all in-house?
We have an internal team that helps develop a lot of the content for the modules, but we do partner with several different vendors. And I wouldn't say that we're exclusive on any particular vendor, but the vendor that we are using specifically for VR training at the moment is Striver. But again, it's not an exclusive vendor. I'm in conversations with different vendors all of the time, and there's a lot of vendors with a lot of cool stuff. And so really, again, there's a lot of great people. And what I would tell you is when we brought these folks in for demos, there were things I liked, things I didn't. Some we called back, some we didn't. But Strivers who we're currently using today.
Thank you.
Coming up here to Bruce. Bruce, just introduce yourself.
Hey, really great. Definitely some polished stuff. We're going down some similar paths, so I recognize a lot of the scars, and thank you so much for sharing a lot of that. So, hey, I'm Bruce Gilman with Georgia Pacific. We're a little bit different margin business. We make toilet paper, okay? So let's level set. That's where I'm.
We use it.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. And we strive to make that great for you. So, same question. A colleague behind us asked. You answered about Striver for the VR. Let me ask the same question about your metaverse experience. Well, tell me about some of the vendors you use there.
I'll be honest with you. From a metaverse perspective, we are literally scratching the surface of what we want to be able to do there. And as we've had these conversations, there's been more no's than yeses as far as what we want to be able to accomplish. And so we've partnered in the past with folks like Accenture, who they've done a lot of metaverse experiences, but I can tell you that literally over the next 3 to 4 months, we have an actual think tank of folks put together to figure out what platform we want to use, because there's been a lot of talk about Meta and all the things that they're doing. I don't know who we're going to wind up using. Obviously, we'd love to do something on-prem, but that may not be realistic from an expense perspective and just sustainability. So I don't know who we're going to wind up using overall from a platform perspective. The screens that you saw there, that was in partnership with Accenture and AltSpace VR. But that is not the platform that I'm saying we are going to be using, because I just don't know.
Sure, it's a very disruptive space, and we've got a bumpy journey ahead of us.
Absolutely.
Vince at the back.
Vince Hernandez from American Bureau of Shipping. What did some analytics and the background interface that you didn't plan for? Normally we plan like this is what we would like to see happen and this is the results. But can you share any kind of background analytics that you weren't expecting that you needed, but in the back end it's like, well, we capture this information and it's really valuable to develop future experiences?
I mean, the biggest thing that we have been able to see from an analytics perspective, and again, it's not just VR, it's all of our immersive learning components, is the very specific information for skill gaps. Because again, if you think about traditional training today, people take a web-based training, they either pass the assessment or they don't fail the assessment. And I don't know, I couldn't tell you that somebody passing an assessment means that they're ready, that they're proficient in what they just read or learned. However, now when we go through something in VR, such as the bank robbery, and it takes them a really long time to answer a particular question, that's letting us know, hey, this person is way off compared to everybody else. I need to spend time with this person. It's also telling us what decisions in particular they're making, and that's important for us because now we know, hey, this is where we need to put some of our resources instead of trying to teach everything. So it's providing us with opportunities to target our coaching. And that's what we weren't necessarily expecting when we went down this journey. We just didn't know. But that's what we're seeing now, and we're giving that information to our coaches. So they're focusing on very particular skill gaps versus trying to boil the ocean, which is what they were doing before. It's like, oh, this person's struggling. Let me teach you from the start point to the finish point. It's like, no, they're good on the start. Focus on this. And we're able to kind of get people trained a lot quicker because of that.
Yeah, and from a feedback perspective, really what we're starting to look at, and we're trying to evolve the way we look at it. We measure a teammate at the midpoint of their program, end of the program, and at 60 days. And trust me when I tell you, at 60 days, they know what they don't know, and they're telling us very loudly. What we're also trying to do, though, is bring that performance data in, like really start to understand in their first 90 days on board, where are the gaps in their productivity? Where are they missing the mark? We're looking at their client satisfaction scores now and starting to pull those in. And those will help us accomplish that a lot faster. If we see a teammate is struggling with deposit accounts or opening up loans or making referrals for a lender, those are areas that we can coach them on. So you start pulling these things together, the analytics that we actually get out of the modules themselves and the analytics that we're getting from our teammates as they go through the program, and then starting to bounce that up against other internal metrics is really going to help us inform. We're not quite there yet. We're evolving that way, and I would say 2023, 2024, we'll be able to successfully bring those together and really start to understand where that teammate's struggling and get even more surgical, if you want, around what we're going to prepare them to do.
Can I just ask one last question before we finish? You made a comment about traditional training, and you're doing it in collaboration. Do you see a time, a situation, how far in the future will it be that you can train everybody in this immersive space and not have any of the old-fashioned PC-based stuff?
No, I don't think we should ever eliminate traditional training because I don't think nothing replaces human-to-human interaction from that perspective. I just think that we need to be more creative and give variety. The same way we don't wear the same shirt every day, you shouldn't be taking the same training every day, ultimately. And so it's got to be different, it's got to be fresh, and it's got to be new so that folks continue to learn. So it's got to be a mesh of different things so that you have a complete learning solution versus just these bits and pieces.
Yeah, and how I see it really evolving too is that, like today, what do we do? We put them in a box and we train them for like 6 weeks and then we expect them to do the job, and that's just not realistic. I don't think any of us could do that, right? We've gotten our areas of expertise over time. And what teammates are starting to tell us, and we've seen it anecdotally, we've actually seen verbatim, so next year we're going to retool our survey a little bit to learn more, but they're telling us, like, I don't want to sit for 4.5, 5 weeks and prepare for my role. I want to do some, go out and work some, come back and do some, go out and work some. We haven't cracked the code on that. but they're already starting to tell us that. And I think part of it is we've opened the door just with the questions that we're asking, but they're starting to see how these other experiences with VR and some of the interactive, like iCoach, the conversation simulators, are helping them. So now they're saying, hey, I don't need this all up front. I want it over time so I can really learn it and master it.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Gentlemen, that was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, time for a break, but please be back at 1 p.m. We've got some really great use cases as well, including Bayern, Honda of America, and Rio Tinto. So see you soon.